Welcome to a solo episode of the Patio Pondering podcast. We're talking solo today because the other day at the Niman Ranch Annual Meeting, something happened that made me stop and think about patio pondering. It happened during a week that already had me doing a lot of reflecting. I was eating lunch with a group of suppliers, and one young woman from a genetics company joined us. My friend Dr. Casey Bradley was giving introductions around the table, and eventually she got to me. She said something along the lines of, "Jim hosts a podcast called Patio Pondering." The young woman looked over at me and almost shouted, "Oh, you're Patio Pondering!" That got a lot of chuckles around the table and some congratulatory comments from the people sitting there at lunch. That moment stuck with me as I drove home from Ames later that day, because it was loud and emphatic. It was clear someone recognized my work. As I thought about it later, it was a moment that, coupled with other quiet conversations I had earlier this week, that reminded me something is happening with this little project. You see, earlier in the week at the Midwest Animal Science meetings, I had a number of hallway conversations with people in my network. Several people said, "Congratulations on what you're doing with Swine Insights," or "Congratulations with your new consulting gig." Others said, "I read your patio ponderings. Not every single one, but I read most of them." And then one evening at the Purdue alumni mixer, I heard about how my words had helped people understand and resolve their leadership challenges. What struck me was that not one of those people had ever commented online. But they were reading. They were listening. Agriculture, and animal agriculture in particular, is a very small world. People may not always click like, but they read, they listen, and sometimes they stop you in a hall or sit down across from you at a dinner table and remind you that words are traveling farther than you realize. And while I was driving home, that moment also reminded me of something else. This week, Patio Pondering quietly hit its 18-month birthday. In those 18 months, there have been 302 written patio ponderings. And this podcast is now episode 78. Between the writing and the podcast, Patio Pondering has been read or listened to on every continent except Antarctica. And I'm trying to figure out why the penguins have not yet discovered patio pondering. But that Antarctica part made me smile a little, because I recently read an article about my former professor and mentor, Dr. Mike Tokash, recently retired from Kansas State University. In that interview, he talked about the reach of his graduate students and the people he has trained over the years. Through those students, his teachings and mentorship has reached every continent except Antarctica. Apparently, we have some work to do to get the penguin to understand the benefits of Dr. Tokash's expertise in swine nutrition. But numbers like that are not really the point. It's not about the downloads. It's not about the clicks. It's not about the likes. What those moments this week made me realize is that somewhere along the way, without really planning it, patio pondering has grown into something with a little more structure than I originally intended. When I started writing reflections on the patio 18 months ago, I was mostly just trying to sort out the thoughts I had in my brain as I was entering a strange new season of life. But when I stepped back and looked at it this week, I realized something. Patio pondering has quietly become something like a three-legged stool. A stool not much different from the old milk stools our grandparents used in barns all across the Midwest. Those stools had 3 legs for one reason. 3 legs are stable even when the barn floor is uneven. And during the past 18 months, Patio Pondering developed 3 legs of its own. The first leg is the writing. Those almost daily reflections that started this whole journey. They're simply my thoughts about agriculture, life, leadership, farming, sometimes the swine industry. Just me thinking out loud with my cup of coffee sitting on the patio. The second leg is the podcast. Those conversations with people throughout agriculture. With people who grew up in it, people who work in it, people who think deeply about it. The podcast had become a place to explore ideas through other voices and other experiences. The third leg is consulting. A way for me to apply the ideas, the experience, the education into real production systems. Part of that consulting work includes collaborating with my new team at Swine Insights International, but that is only one part of a broader consulting leg that continues to develop. That consulting work keeps me grounded in the real economics and real decisions producers and swine farmers face every day. When I step back and look at those 3 legs together, the writing, conversations, and the consulting, they all really serve the same purpose. They are simply an attempt to bring a little clear thinking to a very complex agricultural world. And somewhere along the way, that idea turned into a little phrase that became my tagline. Clear thinking for complex agriculture. My hope for Patio Pondering is pretty simple. I hope it continues to be a place where agriculture can be thought about out loud, where conversations can happen, where disagreements can exist, where ideas get explored, and where the realities of farming and food production stay connected to the people who care about them. That old 3-legged milk stool survived generations because it worked. It was stable even when the ground underneath it wasn't perfectly level. Maybe Patio Pondering is becoming something like that. 3 legs holding up a place to sit for a while and think about ag. And for those of you who've been reading or listening along the way, whether you comment online or just quietly follow along, thank you. Apparently, the penguins are next.